Evil is not extraordinary. It's banal, commonplace. And it'll make an appearance in the least likely of places. I believe dwelling within each and every one of us is God and Satan, and if the right conditions are met, it's possible for the sanest person to commit the most heinous crime.
Speak for yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Come In 81 Kilo,
a Forever Night podcast.
See, now that you told me it's written on there, I'm never going to remember offhanded ever again. I'm going to have to read it all now. That's how transactional money. Yeah, that's how it works. All right. Welcome back, friends.
Let's do it.
You just ready to go with this? Oh my God. This is it's an episode is what it is. Season 3, episode 19, Jane Doe.
We're only escalating we got canceled. We don't care what our episodes are about anymore.
Nor do we care, like, oh, you guys, we're not allowed to show a dead body. What are you going to do? Cancel us? What happened in this episode? Yeah, this is really a further escalation of we don't need to play it safe anymore. So what can we do? And I have to admit that Reese is a little bit, he's a little bit fallen idol still. He feels a little irrational, but it feels more justified. He's very defeatist in this episode, but it feels like this is probably a man who through his entire career has had to fight to be seen as a legitimate cop.
Yeah. I think Reese is has been traumatized by this guy. Specifically for his entire career. Yeah.
And, oh, look, it's all happening again. And so it's got to be like, oh, my God, I can't even handle this. And, this one is going to be, look, we are going to do our level best to discuss this through the lens of what this show is trying to say and not include the wider scope of the complicated, tragic, horrific state of the way that people of color and law enforcement have related to each other historically since the dawn of the two of these things. Like, since these two things existed together, this has been a problem. And this is not the forum for us to solve anything or discuss anything about that. We are discussing the television show Forever Night. And just because they chose to discuss this, I don't feel like two white people in a room really get to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything to add to that conversation.
Right. So what we're going to do is discuss this particular episode and the way that things are portrayed in this particular episode and the way that Reese is moving through the system that is given to us through the lens of Forever Night. And I feel like that's the best way for us to tackle this.
Yeah.
And I love that the last 4 episodes, I've had to issue a disclaimer at the beginning. And guess what, y'all? There's going to be one next time, too. Oh, boy. All right. Like I said, this is Forever Night Season 3, Episode 19, Jane Doe. So we open on this car traveling through the woods, and it stops, and it pulls a body from the trunk, and they whoever this person is, the driver, hangs the body up in a tree and then shoots the body with a shotgun multiple times and then drives off. And that is our intro.
Cold intro.
And here's the part of the episode where I give you something to go and look at that actually gives you real life context on what's happening. Just like It's Okay to Not Be Okay is a great K-drama about people with intellectual differences. If you are curious about the history of this type of systemic racism in the United States and to a certain extent Canada, I encourage you to look up the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is located in Montgomery, Alabama, and they have a very powerful memorial to the victims of what is referred to as lynching, which is when people of color were hung, which is what they are, or lynched, which is what they're talking about in the beginning here, which is why this person is hung up in the tree. And as someone who lives in the southern United States, this is a very present and real and painful part of our history. And to see it referenced in this show is like, oh my God, we are going there. Okay, here we go. But go look up that memorial. It is beautiful. I would love to someday see it in person. It's actually part of a larger memorial, but anyway, that's our intro. That's how we start this episode. And we don't know right away that this person that got hung up in the tree is a Black victim, but we find out pretty quickly. So,
yes.
God, because we come back and Reese is watching an interview on TV. And the lady who is the interviewer, the talk show host. Yeah. She's like, okay, let me read this excerpt from this book, which can we pause for a moment and talk about how the cover design for this book is the most 90s cover design I have ever seen in my entire fucking life. It's like a who's who of 90s design aesthetics. It's got the I was clipped out of the newspaper letter font. Mm-hmm. It's like at an angle. It's real wild.
So she reads this thing.
Yeah, she reads it and it's like, I was transformed the instant I first killed. I became and will be forever in the eyes of all a murderer. And this woman is interviewing a guy named Jordan Manning who wrote this book called The Killing Mind. And she refers to it as the most controversial book in recent years. And it was written by him when he was in prison for manslaughter. So this guy is a convicted murderer. He wrote a book about a murderer, and a publisher published it.
But it's a work of fiction, ostensibly.
Yeah.
About a serial killer.
Written in poem form.
Yes.
I gotta be honest, this kind of sounds like driving. It just sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Like I can't imagine reading a first-person account about a serial killer in poet form, like in rhyme. In rhyme, in iambic pentameter. I just can't. But apparently, it's really popular because Lacroix later refers to him as the man who got rich writing greeting cards for the devil.
Yeah, because of course Lacroix has read this book.
I mean. He was like, The Killing Mind? Me? Is this about me? And so he checked on it anyway. But Reese is watching this interview because we zoom out at this point to see that Reese is watching it. And the interviewer is continuing and she says, how much of you is in this book? And the guy's like, well, you know, every novelist enriches his characters with his own life experience, which is not an answer, but is kind of an answer. And the interviewer, which I love, she says...
It's an answer for Reese.
Yeah, it is.
To read between the lines.
Right.
But nothing that would hold up in court.
I'm not going there. Okay, so the interviewer says she read this book, and it's a first-person account about a murder spree told by a poetry-spouting psychopath She says it's degenerative, it's amoral, it's obscene. Did you write it for your buddies in cell block 11?
You know, I read this book, and I'll be right up front with you, okay? It's a fictional first-person account of a serial murder spree told by a poetry-spouting psychopath. It's degenerate, it's amoral. Who's your audience for this book anyway? I mean, did you write it for your buddies in cell block 11?
And I don't think we linger on how disrespectful this interviewer is.
Right.
Long enough.
He very graciously moves past the implied insult from the interview host.
Well, no, he turns to the camera and just stops addressing her and starts addressing the camera.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he's good at just bottling things up.
Well, he's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the fact that she's
or
on
is he a sociopath?
No, I don't think he can turn it. Oh, maybe. He turned it on enough to be able to get a publishing contract.
Psychopaths usually aren't meticulous.
Oh, okay. So then he's a sociopath.
Because they can't.
So she got it wrong. It's a poetry spouting sociopath.
Maybe the book is about a psychopath.
Well,
we don't know.
Anyway, like the fact that she's on the fact that she's on public television.
Yeah.
And she's interviewing this guy probably for a promotional spot. Like probably the publisher got him on here so that he could get some publicity. And she's like, this is some bullshit. What the fuck is this? I can't believe I just read this. I feel like I need to scour my brain. I can't get it out. What the fuck did I just read? And he's like, okay. So he turns and looks directly at the screen. And this is when he's like, evil is not extraordinary. It's banal, commonplace. And it'll make an appearance in the most unlikely of places. There's God and the devil in all of us. There's two wolves in all of us. And if the right conditions are met, it's possible for the sanest person to commit the most heinous crime. And during all this, Reese gets a phone call and he just picks the phone up and goes, I'm on my way. Like, did anybody say anything? Or did he just go, I'm on my way and hang up? And then he's like, shit, I don't know where I'm going.
I didn't get the address, and I don't have caller ID.
Star 69 calls it back. So then Reese actually says to the TV, addresses the TV, and he goes, speak for yourself. Like, not everybody will commit a crime when given the opportunity. Actually, most people will. There's some really cool sociological studies about that, like the one where you can push the button to you think you're shocking somebody in the other room.
Yeah.
And as long as someone in authority tells you to do it, most people will keep doing it, even if they can hear the screams of pain from the other room.
Yeah. What's that? The Millhouse? I think it starts with an M.
That's that. He's like one sociology guy who did he did the 6 degrees of separation. He did the one where people lined up around a building and they weren't actually waiting in line for anything. And some people stood in line for hours, not even knowing what they were waiting for. Or he had a guy stand on the corner and look up at the sky to see how many people would look up.
Yes. It's the Stanford prison experiment.
Okay.
We don't need to talk about it here. Look
it up.
Dr. Philip G. Zimbardo. But it's one of many in a whole class of psychology experiments, sociological, like social pressure experiments that present a lot of counterintuitive patterns of human behavior that I think everybody should be aware of for the sake of just put it in your toolbox as a reference for, oh, this is a bias I did not know existed.
And I probably have.
And probably I have it.
Yeah.
And knowing about it is the first step in, like, countering it.
Knowing about a trap is the first step in avoiding it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of like when we talked to George Paxinos. So on Strange and Beautiful Book Club, we interviewed this renowned neuroscientist, which sounds really fancy, and it is really fancy. And we did it, and I can't believe we did. But he was talking about how, free will is effectively an illusion because we are simply a set of instincts and prejudices, and that guides our behavior. And it's just that we are so cognitively removed from our own decision-making process that we think it's free and inspired by our own agency, but in reality,
and that we're rational agents, and
in reality, we're effectively not, and that a lot of what we do is really just training. And that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't excuse anything. It doesn't get anybody out of anything, but it does give you a context, like a frame of reference for people's actions. Like when we look back at past atrocities and we're like, wow, a lot of people participated in that. Why would they? And it's like, well, honestly, for a lot of people, they wouldn't have even noticed.
Right. They were raised from birth where this is the normal thing.
Right. And it's like you learn when you're thinking about your own thinking, metacognition, the first thought is usually your upbringing or your training, how you have been taught to perceive the world, and you can kind of disregard it. And then the second thought is like who you've taught yourself to be.
Yeah, there's a good book that summarizes a lot of those ideas called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something to think about because we like to think that we're better and we like to think that we're highly evolved, and it's worth examining our own thoughts and ideas and biases and figuring out how we got here, because I don't know why we're not talking about the episode anymore. So back to it.
maybe subconsciously you maybe don't want to talk about this episode.
I do want to talk about this episode. I want to talk about this episode in a way that makes it feel like I'm just talking about the episode, and that I'm encouraging people to think about the things that are happening in this episode, but that I'm not speaking for anyone.
But we're tangential conversationalists, so.
I mean, that's why we have a podcast. You can give us a topic and we can just fucking go. So I think this is the point of these last few episodes, is to inspire conversation. And so bravo, it inspires conversation. And what actually, Reese gets that phone call and then he does the speak for yourself, turns his TV off. And then we go to the morgue because for some reason Reese has been called to the morgue. We're not going to examine this. It doesn't really matter. He just needed to be part of the discussion. So here he is. And Natalie and Tracy and Nick and Reese are all standing around the autopsy table. And Natalie goes, this isn't going to be pleasant. And Nick goes, when is it ever? She actually tells him, mask up. This isn't going to be pleasant. I watch a lot of Dr. G Medical Examiner, and she actually has an entirely separate room for decomposing bodies, like bodies that have been found already deep in decomposition. And it's like you can clean it more effectively. So it's interesting that this body, which, by the way, if it was hanging in a tree for 3 to 4 weeks, would not have this much flesh still on it. Like,
right.
It's fine.
Well, if it was wrapped in like heavy plastic sheeting.
No, he took all that off.
He took it off?
Yeah, all she is like wearing her coat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it hung
I missed that part.
in the woods.
Right.
In an isolated area for 3 to 4 weeks. And they do mention that they can't get fingerprints because it's too far gone. Because actually, your skin on your hands is the first thing to fall off. It's called gloving, which is really fascinating, by the way.
Degloving?
Gloving because it ends up looking like a glove.
Oh, okay.
Because it separates.
I think, is when it comes off.
Yeah, it sloughs off.
Yeah.
I love the word slough. Sloughs off. I'm done. I don't know that they would have. I don't know that they would have also been able to see needle marks in her skin.
That also, like, popped up for me.
And they get something out from under her fingernails.
I pushed.
You know what?
That
it's
doubt
fine.
aside.
We're just gonna not worry about it. Is what we're gonna do. Accuracy and realism being the thing that Forever Night is known for. We're just not gonna worry about it.
On the fingernail thing.
Yeah.
It's hairs. And hairs are really hard.
Yeah, but her fingernails would have fallen off.
But it could have still been there, like stuck to her fingers. What I'm saying is
it's
I
fine.
guess you're saying
is
the hairs
fine.
wouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah.
And I was saying the hairs wouldn't have broken
down. What? She's wearing gloves when they hang her up.
That's right.
Because we see him untie the hands and hang her up, and she's wearing gloves. So we're just going to go with that. And leave it right there.
That was his mistake.
Yeah. Natalie is also able to take samples of her internal organs, which would be liquefied at this point, but which is, again...
First thing to go.
I can't. Because as Matt always tells the kids, you have an agreement with the bacteria in your body that right now they feed you and later you feed them. We're not terrible parents. It fits when when it comes up. All right. So this is Jane Doe number 355. And she was found hanging in this tree. And they actually is outside their jurisdiction, but they brought this body there because they are the closest ones with facilities to handle this type of job, which it turns out is Natalie's table, her single table in the morgue where we have every single body.
So this brings up an interesting question of jurisdiction. I could see them outsourcing the autopsy to Natalie because Natalie's the closest facility with the resources. But why is the I don't know if they have what is the equivalent of a county in Canada, in a Canadian province, but why doesn't the local law enforcement, why aren't they doing the investigation? Because they don't have any information about where she was potentially from.
Well, they could actually be doing the investigation too, but Reese kind of goes rogue on this.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
They just have the body, and Nick and Tracy are kind of like, no leads, okay. And Reese
Yeah.
is like, here's your fucking lead.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, Reese. And really, Nick is doing his police work following Reese around,
Yeah.
not investigating the murder of this lady, I guess, until they get just the generic description of her and look through missing persons.
Reese absolutely hijacks Nick and Tracy for this and puts them on it. And there could very well be another investigation happening in the precinct or in the like area where it actually happened, but we don't talk about it because Reese is just like, oh, I know who did this, and we're going to figure out how to prove he did it. And I want to point out that I made the crack about it's Natalie, but it could just be that she has a freezer because do you remember Michael Jordan, like the basketball player, Michael Jordan's dad?
Oh, yeah.
Was murdered in North Carolina, in a rural county in North Carolina, which rural in America is not the same as rural in Canada because we are very decentralized. So there's still a fairly high population in rural areas, whereas in like Canada, you get really high density urban populations and super low density rural populations. So it could have been even more rural than our rural.
Right.
And they literally put him in a shed because they didn't have a freezer.
Right.
And that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
That was about the time that this happened. They were putting Michael Jordan's dad, who they didn't know who it was. They just found him in a creek. They stuck him in somebody's shed. And by the time they got him and took him to a proper autopsy facility, he was like severely decomposed and it was difficult to identify his body. So there very well could have been no freezer capability in the rural county where she was found.
Yeah.
Whereas Natalie has that walk-in cool room. So that literally could have been like the facility she's referring to could have just been the fact that she has a place to store them.
Good point.
Natalie says, like we said, decomp is 3 to 4 weeks. This is a black female in her 20s to 30s, but it's going to be difficult to identify who she is because her face is missing. And
Right.
Reese goes, no, she was deliberately disfigured to conceal her identity. And this is when Tracy is like, I'm just going to step out for a minute because they're all standing around this body. This would be hard for most people because it would be hard for me. I talk about it a lot, but I also watch it on TV. I don't think I could be in the room with a heavily decomposed body because, there's things that go along with it that are instinctually unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And so she steps out. And this is when Natalie says that the shot might not have been what killed her. She had ligature marks on her neck, so she could very easily have been strangled. And Nick says, talk about overkill. And then this is when Reese reveals that he has some information that he has not shared with anybody yet. And that is just a really, really spot on hunch. I mean, he's seen this mode of killing before. He's seen this series of this is Jordan Manning's signature.
Right. He literally spent a chunk of his early career compiling a whole stack of similar unsolved murders that he kind of like deduced psychologically back to Jordan Manning.
Yeah.
And so when he sees this and he hears the details, he's like, oh, another one for the stack.
Yeah, I know exactly who did this. He goes, it's not overkill, it's desecration.
Talk about overkill. It's not overkill. It's desecration. I know who did this.
Yeah.
And he goes, I know exactly who did this. Jordan Manning. And then whoop, we cut back to the precinct. And this is when Tracy and Nick and Reese are all together. And Tracy and Nick are sitting at the table and Reese is kind of hovering over them. And there's this giant stack of folders on the table. And Reese is like, I'm going to give you the tea on Jordan Manning. Like, he's a bad dude. He kills people. And Tracy's like, oh yeah, I read his book. And they both look at her and she's like, skimmed it. It seemed really interesting. I mean,
she's a homicide detective.
She's a homicide detective. She read a book about a psychopath. I don't know what to tell you. And Nick's like, well, to hear people talk about it, he's the literary rookie of the year. And Reese is like, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. He is a raging racist, and you have never encountered evil like you've encountered this guy. Like, this guy's the most evil guy you will ever meet. And Nick is like, ho, ho, ho. Hold my beer. Hold my blood light.
What?
This
Have you been saving that one?
No.
Okay.
I've said it before. Okay. It's from My Best Friend is a Vampire.
Oh, gotcha.
This blood's for you. So this sends him into a flashback because guess what, y'all? Nick met Hitler. This isn't funny, but also, oh my God.
They start out like it's not obvious it's Hitler.
Yeah. Honestly, on a rewatch, I think I'm going to move this episode back to like the Rasputin episode. So we get Rasputin and Hitler out of the way, and we don't have to come back to this because the final 5 are like the best episodes of Forever Night. And then in the middle of it is Fallen Idol, and then this one, which is like, hey, I met Hitler.
By the way,
I didn't like Hitler. He creeped me out, but I met him. And this is when we see them on the train, and this guy is coughing. And Lacroix ends up hypnotizing the guy and telling him to fuck off. So he leaves. And then this young bearded fellow who's sitting across from them on the train. Mustachioed.
Long mustachioed fellow.
Yeah, he's like, thank you, sir. Like, for getting that guy to go away. And Lacroix's like, Nicholas, were these the best accommodations you could find? And Nick goes, they were the only ones I could find, given the circumstances. Why are they riding a train?
They can fly.
They can fucking fly. They can fly.
Maybe they're trying to maintain an identity, and part of that identity is like paperwork for how you got into a city.
You could buy the train ticket and then just fly.
But if they're keeping track of who redeemed tickets.
They're not. There's no computer system. How would they keep track of that?
I don't know.
Can they fly faster than a train?
Obviously.
One assumes. I don't know. Even if it's like, well, it's a multi-day journey. Well, this isn't a light-proof train. They could literally have just flown, got on the train in the cargo compartment for the day, and then gotten off and flown again. I don't know. It's fine. Whatever. Who cares? They're on a train. That's what matters. And the guy across from them's like, oh, stinking gypsies. Are you guys gypsies? And Lacroix's like, no, we are definitely not gypsies. And this is when we come back to the present because Nick is like, huh. I can't believe I still remember that, which is funny, actually, because most of this flashback is Lacroix talking to who we find out is Hitler. Not Nick. Nick's gone.
not even in the room.
Nick's not even in the room. So how is he having a flashback about when he wasn't actually in the room? I don't know. But Reese
maybe Lacroix related the story to him.
Yeah, well, he must have because he gets that portrait that Hitler drew of him. Because remember, Hitler wanted to be an artist.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but he got kicked out of art school.
Yeah. And that's all we're going to talk about that.
But,
so Reese is still. No.
You can cut this out. But so, I think it was like a webcomic thing. And it was this guy's complaining about this artist that is always like taking up space in this gallery.
Yeah.
And he's like, his stuff is horrible. Why does it always get put up? Like it's causing a problem. I forget what the premise is.
Yeah.
But he's like, okay, I'm going to go back in time and take care of this guy. And so
He gets him kicked out of art school,
he
and it's Hitler.
comes back and he's like, all right, I got that guy kicked out of art school way back when. What's the worst that could happen?
Thank you for that interlude.
You're welcome.
This palate cleanser brought to you by Matt's Tangential Thinking.
Moments in the meme sphere with Matt.
So then Reese is telling them about Jordan, and this is when he like taps the stack of files, and he's like, these are all unknowns going back 20 years. They are all black women chosen for their anonymity. They were all murdered or lynched in one way or another, because that's his joke / like trademark. And he says that of all of these women, only one of them was identified, and it was his last victim. And it's because Joe knew her. She was a regular girl on his beat when he was a vice cop. And Jordan Manning caught up with her after he found out that she was informing on Jordan Manning to Reese. And actually, the only reason Jordan Manning is even in prison is because he was arrested on an unrelated charge. He killed a guy in a bar fight.
And since Joe was following him all the time, Joe was there to arrest him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the record, Reese brings out this stack of unsolved cases.
Yeah.
And says, Jordan Manning did it.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence, so you'll just have to trust me.
Yes. I mean, he tells them, well, he'll tell them in a minute. But
as much as Reese
I can't.
Gets on
Yeah.
Nick about hunches.
Yeah. This is better than the time that Nick was like, oh, I know who did it. It was Elon Musk. And then proceeded to zoom around town, sticking people in his trunk and leaving them like presents for Skanky to come unwrap.
Yep.
So at least it's better than that. And Reese actually assigns Tracy to help Natalie. He's like, okay, you're going to go help Natalie. And she's like, oh, but Captain, I was already collating the missing persons. And he's like, nope, you're done with that. You need to go and help Natalie, and you are on it until you find out who did this, if it takes all year, starting right now. Because she hesitates, and he's like, I said right now. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry. She leaves. And Nick just gives him a look like, the fuck? And this is when Reese is like, I know. Like, I was really hard on her. But he says, if she wants to learn to cut the mustard, that means she's got to get over her squeamishness. So she's got to go. She's got to go and help Natalie. She's got to help Natalie figure out who this is and find them some evidence that gets Jordan Manning convicted of this murder.
Right. And also, side angle on it is she needs to get a little desensitized to dead bodies.
Yeah.
So that she can be more effective as a homicide detective.
Right. If she's distracted by her physical condition when she's investigating a case, it's not going to.
Right. She's not going to be able to take in as many details and think about things.
Yeah. And this is when Nick looks at Reese and he's like, okay, so tell me, how did you know it was Manning who murdered these women? Did you have a run-in with him in the past and you had a flashback? Because that's what usually happens to me. And Reese is like, no. Let's just say I was 95% sure. And then he told me he did it. And then we cut to Tracy and Natalie at the morgue. And Tracy is like, Reese told me everything is on hold. Every other case that Nick and Tracy have is on hold until they get an ID on this woman, even if it takes all year. And Natalie tries to give her anti-nausea pills. And just like pro tip for everyone who's been listening, never take pills that Natalie offers you. This is too soon. After the last episode. She's like, Tracy, I made these special pills. Why don't you just take them and we'll both see what happens?
It'll make your brain work better.
Why are they red? Shh. Just jabs her with a hypodermic, injects her with Nick's blood. I just want to see what happens. But Tracy actually refuses, which good job on Tracy. And she goes, I've got to learn how to do this, and that means no cheating. Actually, it wouldn't be that bad to take anti-nausea pills because then your body learns to not be nauseous around dead bodies.
Right, you prevent the association.
Yeah, but that's fine. She goes, I'm not here for the captain. I'm here to deal with my little problem. which is her problem with really far gone dead body. I mean, it's a fair problem to have. She's a young cop. Yeah, she was going to have to confront this eventually. And Natalie's like, okay, cool. So let's start. And then she just whips the sheet off the body.
The graphic reveal.
And we can see it from the top down. Like the missing face, tits out, all of it. It's just right there on the book. This is the most dead body we've seen. Maybe season 1 where there's that woman on the bench, which is technically a dead body.
Right.
But this is the most like, I'm a dead body that we have ever seen in the whole show. And here it is. And Tracy ends up like closing her eyes and like summoning spiritual help to like get through this. And then they start checking the body with magnifiers. Natalie does this thing where she goes boop and like flicks her her magnification glasses down. And so Tracy does the same. And Natalie starts giving her report out loud about the missing face. She's like, okay, we're missing, she's doing
she's dictating. She's recording.
Yeah, she's dictating her report for later.
Yeah.
And Tracy actually interjects and she's like, this is so awful. It is so sad. And it feels like nobody cares. And Natalie says,
I like
Tracy,
this line from Natalie.
We know, we care, and now we're going to do something about it.
It's so awful. It's sad. I mean, to die like this? No one even knows or seems to care that you're gone?
Trace, we know. We care. And now we're going to do something about it. Okay? Okay.
Okay. Like, yeah.
If you need a little motivation.
Yeah. We know. We're here. We care. We're doing this. And we're going to figure out what happened. And that's our job. And we're going to do it. And Tracy's like, cool, let's do this. And then while they're busy doing this, I think Nick is just following Reese around because he knows what happened last time he went on a vigilante investigation spree. And he's concerned Reese might do the same thing. So he's following Reese around. And so Nick and Reese go to this bookstore. And this looks like a really cool bookstore. Like, I wish we had this bookstore near, but like, I would go to this bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this is Ben McNally's, like from Stranger Than Fiction.
Oh, yeah, it could be the same.
Yeah. But
if the production team was consistent between this episode and that episode.
I mean, they're still filming in Toronto, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they go to this bookstore, and Manning is actually having a book signing event. And Reese is literally just standing like 10 feet away from Jordan Manning, just glaring at him. Just like, just like, I can't. This part is really hard. And then Manning actually signs a book and gives it to him.
Manning approaches Reese.
No, he doesn't. He signs the book and he gives it to an assistant and tells him to give this book to Reese. Yeah, no, he's going to confront him in a minute, but not just yet. First, he gives him this book. And Reese takes the book and he's talking to Nick at the same time. And he says, you're looking at the end of Western civilization. He's a cold-blooded killer and it made him a celebrity. So on the record, Reese predicted Dexter.
Except Dexter who wasn't
I think
trained.
The rise of the obsession with...
Yeah.
I like
He culturally predicted
yeah.
what would drive the popularity of a show like Dexter.
Yeah. I like true crime as much as, I mean, I listen to a fair amount of true crime. I go through seasons where I listen to true crime and then I don't like it anymore for a while. But I never like listening to the ones that go in depth about serial killers where we focus on the serial killer. Because to me, it feels voyeuristic. Like, why are we focusing on the way this person killed people? It doesn't feel great to me. And I've seen the rise of the true crime genre and how we're making movies about these serial killers, like Jeffrey Dahmer, one in particular. There was that Netflix one about Jeffrey Dahmer, and they cast an actor who is objectively handsome to be Jeffrey Dahmer. And so people were like, oh my God, I'm in love with Dahmer. Like, he's so hot. And I'm sorry, y'all, but that's just gross. It's just gross. Jeffrey Dahmer did some really terrible things, and he was able to get away with it because he was gay, and it was perceived as a gay crime, and nobody cared. And that's tragic and that's fucked up. And I cannot believe we made a movie about it that was a sensationalized movie about it. And I can't imagine being a victim of some of these people and then you see a movie get made about the person that killed them. And yes, no killer is allowed to profit off their story while they are in prison, but we should not be making these people celebrities. And that's what Reese is saying. This guy should not be a celebrity for being a killer.
Right.
If you want to focus on anything, focus on the victims. That's why I like that podcast by Holly Rubenhold about the victims of Jack the Ripper. It's not about Jack the Ripper. She doesn't give a shit about Jack the Ripper. It's about giving those victims back who they were.
Right, yeah. Focusing on their names and
their lives,
like
and the
filling
things
out their story.
and what in their life led them to that moment where they were victimized, and not, oh, they were prostitutes, that's why. And so they just become this caricature. Well, we are so deeply fetishizing like Jack the Ripper or Jeffrey Dahmer, or anyway, that's my soapbox about. I'm bound to run afoul of a couple of soapboxes in this episode, and that's one I feel like I can go off a bit about, which is just, it's okay to be informed about true crime, but I don't think it's okay to fetishize these serial killers. And that's what Reese is talking about. He's like, this guy has become sensational because he's controversial, because people have this morbid fascination with murderers and this type of crime. And Nick is like, okay, Captain, I'm hear you, but like, if he confessed to you, and this is when Reese goes, I didn't say he confessed. I said he told me he did it. That's a distinction without difference. I guess he didn't explicitly say it. What he's trying to say is, in the book, he put so many details in the book that only the killer would know. It had to be like a letter to anybody who knew he did it. Right. To be like, haha, I did it, but couched in fiction in such a way that they could never use it as a confession.
Right.
And so Reese takes the book that Jordan Manning gives him and he flips it open. And in the cover, it says, to my favorite loser, Joe Reese. And then there's a Italian phrase, which I'm gonna try. Per me se vatia la perduta gente. I don't know.
Bill, is that Spanish?
It's Italian. Per me si va tra la perduta gente. This way to join the lost people. Dante's Inferno. It's part of the inscription of the entrance to hell.
And Nick is like, oh, okay. Because Reese goes, it must be some kind of racial slur. And Nick goes, oh, no, it's Italian. And it says, this way to join the lost people. Because it's from Dante's Inferno. And it's part of the inscription on the entrance to hell.
Yep.
And because this is the type of thoroughness that people come to our podcast for, I went ahead and looked up the entire inscription on the entrance to hell.
Oh, good.
Which is, through me, the way to the city of woe. Through me, the way to everlasting pain. Through me, the way among the lost. Okay, so a note, I looked through like 17 translations and I could not find one that specifically said, this way to join the lost people. Through me, the way among the lost. Justice moved my maker on high. Divine power made me. Wisdom supreme and primal love. Before me, nothing but things eternal. And eternal I endure. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. There you go. Read the whole thing to you. And this is when Reese is like, yeah, he told me by putting it in the book. It's all in here, Nick. And he hands him his copy of the book. And then we kind of cut to a little bit forward when Manning is done doing his signature, like his signing, and he's getting ready to go. And this is when Reese comes back to confront Manning. And Manning looks over at Nick and he goes, I see they finally teamed you up with an Aryan. Oh boy.
So we can immediately see why Joe Reese feels as strongly as he does about Manning.
This kind of feels like, you remember in Bad Blood, the Jack the Ripper episode? Mm-hmm. How I was upset that Jack the Ripper is so obviously evil that I thought it would have been a much more powerful episode if we weren't sure.
Yeah.
But I feel the same about this. I kind of feel like if we had left it ambiguous about whether or not Jordan Manning was actually as bad as Reese said he was, I think I would have connected with him as a villain. I mean, he's a bad guy. I hate him. I'm on board with this episode. It's fine. But I feel like including this line and giving us like a slam dunk, this dude's a douchebag, ends up cheapening our overall narrative because racism is insidious and it is not always overt.
Right.
And when we make this guy overtly racist and overtly an asshole, it undermines what we're going for here. It's fine. Again, it's fine. But I would have liked this better if he had not had that obvious of a dig. Because with
Right.
the book that he gives Reese, that doesn't automatically read as I'm a giant douchebag. It's just like poke. Like
Right. It's just we have a history,
yeah.
we
I
have
gave you a
a
gift.
rivalry.
Oh, good, Reese. You showed up for my signature. I wasn't sure you remembered me. You know.
Yeah.
And then we get this line, the Aryan line, and it's like, that's not. I mean, I guess they never wanted Reese at any point to appear like the villain, which is also fine. But I think when we do the reboot in a 2024 lens, giving Jordan Manning a longer time period before we even if he is never overtly racist, but he is always tacitly racist,
Mm-hmm.
he's a more realistic version. I mean, yes, this happens overtly sometimes, but also just sometimes it's subtle.
Yeah.
And that's the insidious thing about racism is that it is not,
More like a continuous accumulation of small slights.
yeah, it's not always the big things. Sometimes it's little things. And Nick, I'm sure, doesn't love being called an Aryan. So, he is blonde haired and blue eyed, I guess. But he's like, oh God, I met Hitler. Don't even play. It's not great. So then Reese actually pushes Manning up against the wall. He like grabs him and pushes him against the wall. And this is when Manning goes, it's okay, people. He's a police officer. He's allowed to do this. I'm not going there. I'm not talking about this. We are not discussing this. I saw that deep breath and we are going to move right along.
That's a whole
along.
other.
That's what we're doing right now.
That's a entirely different genre of podcast.
Yes. I'm sure they're out there. Please feel free to go find them. Find people who are people of color talking about that and listen to their voices. And this is when Jordan Manning is like, oh, poor Reese, you still have a persecution complex. And as Matt pointed out earlier, if you are in a system that is systematically discriminating against you, that's not a persecution complex. That's just what's happening. That's just seeing the truth. And he goes, but you're a captain now. Thank God for affirmative action. They pack so much shit into like 3 lines.
Right.
And I can't. I just can't because we just went through the overturning of affirmative action and there is so much there. And I encourage people to go out and find people of color talking about this and listen to their voices. We are not going to address it on this podcast because this is when Nick steps in and he's like, that's enough out of you. Like, quit it.
Right. Stop egging on my captain.
Stop. And this is when Jordan looks at him and he goes, pardon me, detective, but Joe and I go way back. Our rapport isn't easily understood by outsiders. And then he looks over at Reese and he goes, you'd like to kill me, wouldn't you, Joe? And Reese is like, actually, I'd like to take you downtown. And this is when Jordan is like, no, man. First, you don't have a warrant. You just shoved me against the wall. I am leaving. And then he just dips. And Nick turns to Reese and he goes, I'm sorry, Captain, but what the hell is the matter with you? And
Which
then
I'm glad Nick called Reese out on
he's
it.
like, what is happening? What did you just do? And then we cut to Natalie and Tracy and the very graphic body, which we are still very graphically showing everybody. And this is when Natalie's like, Tracy, how you holding up? And Tracy's like, I'm doing all right. And this, she finds the hair and blood matted underneath the fingernails. Mm-hmm. And Natalie tells him to bag him and tag him and she'll get him sent off. Like, that's a really good find, Tracy. Good job. And Natalie finds puncture marks on the victim's thigh. And they're not typical of a user like a drug user. She says because they're administered too cleanly. And also they're in a weird spot. They're like on her thigh. And Tracy goes, is it insulin? Is she diabetic? Like, this is a clue. We mull over it for a little while. And the real important point here is this is when Natalie's like, okay, are you ready? Because we're going in. It's time to open this body up. And then we come back to Nick and Reese. And Reese and Nick are at the precinct. And Reese is like power walking through the precinct. And he's like, now you see what we're up against, or what I'm up against. And Nick goes, what we're up against. But honestly, Captain, you tipped him off. Now he knows we're onto him. You should have held it together. I mean, yes, but I can see where Reese is just like, this guy, he goes, later he says he gets under my skin and he makes it crawl. He's dealt with this dude for so long. He's seen this guy get away with so much, and it has to be so infuriating. It's difficult to not act on how he's feeling. And Nick tells him, like, you've told me plenty of times, like, you've given me the lecture about not tipping off the suspect before, and yet you just went and did it. And Reese is like, I'm sorry, I can't help it, man. This guy just gets under my skin. And Nick calls it. He's like, oh, you're the one who busted him, aren't you? And Reese goes, yeah, I was there. And he's about to say more, but this is when some flowers arrive. And they're from Manning.
Of course they are.
And he sent his entire tour schedule going back 6 months. So here's my alibi, basically. Mm-hmm. This is what you're probably looking for. And Nick reads the card and it says, you'd have picked these yourself if you had the time. And Reese goes, funny guy. Next time, remind me to shove roses down his throat, thorns and all. And then he throws the flowers away and he goes, these are cotton flowers, Nick. It's not important, but these are not actually cotton flowers. Like, we live in cotton country. I drive past cotton fields every single day. This is not what cotton looks like. And they could have bought cotton. You can buy cotton for...
Well, you can buy cotton flowers around here, but they could have plucked out the petals and stuffed in cotton balls.
No, cotton doesn't really have like a flower you can pick. Like, you don't put cotton flowers in a bouquet. You put cotton buds, like unopened cotton buds or partially open cotton buds. They're real pretty, but there's a huge market abroad for cotton for bouquets. And if you just look up cotton bouquet, you can see what they look like. They do look like a cotton ball in like a flower. It doesn't matter. I get where they were going. Maybe it wasn't commercially available at the time and they were just doing their best. I'm not sure, but just a side note, these are not cotton flowers. But the point is, that was you'd have picked these yourself if you had the time, dig. Because famously in the United States, if you're listening to this and you're not U.S. based, cotton was one of the main crops that enslaved people were used as labor for picking, because it's extremely labor intensive, especially before the invention of the cotton gin, which the cotton gin was used to separate the seeds out of the cotton, because otherwise you have to individually pick the seeds out. And actually the cotton gin is credited with the resurgence of enslavement in the U.S., and that's a whole other complicated history thing that we're not going to get into today. But that's the joke. I mean, that's the shitty joke that Jordan Manning is saying is like, here's some cotton. Yeah. You'd have picked it yourself. Okay. And then we come back to see Natalie. And Natalie is actually autopsying the body very graphically. Like, we see it from the top again.
We get organs.
We get organs. We get breasts with no nipples. Right. But we get breasts. And this isn't even remotely a Y incision. I don't know why we didn't do... All autopsies are performed the exact same. Why wouldn't... It doesn't matter. It's fine. But she's taking samples. They're not masked at all. They're just... It's fine. But she takes a pancreas sample. And because that's how they're going to test to see if this lady had diabetes. Because we think maybe those shots were insulin. And then we come back to the precinct. And Nick gets this stack of files. Reese drops it on his desk, and he tells him to find the clues in the book to the murders, and he'll see that the murders in the book include information that only the killer would have known and that they correlate to these missing persons cases. But he has couched all of his facts in fiction, and so he can deny it. Oh, that's totally coincidence. I didn't know anything about it. And Nick says, well, back then we didn't have the sophistication we have today. We didn't have the cutting edge police work that we are working with right now. Even when we started the show, we didn't have the same level of DNA was not as prevalent when we started Forever Night
and
as
it's
it is
gone
now.
from 92 to 96.
Yeah.
DNA testing went from weeks and not I guess as high confidence that a match was a match.
Yeah.
And in just like 4 or 5 years, you can get it back in a few days and have a lot more confidence that a lot more parts of the DNA match.
Yeah. And this is when Reese is really being super fatalist about everything that's happening. Like he's on one hand, he's telling Nick, investigate these missing cases, like match them up with the murders in the book. But on the other hand, Nick is like, well, there's got to be something. We'll figure it out. And Reese is like, no, we won't. He just wants us to try so he can laugh at us. And you can bet your badge this murder is airtight and we're never going to figure it out. So he's like, figure it out. We're never going to figure it out. And I think what we're supposed to be getting here is Reese just wants to be believed.
Right.
He doesn't really believe he'll be able to get Jordan Manning on anything. He's hoping he will, but he's not. That's not why he's doing this. He wants someone to tell him, you're right.
Yeah, he wants someone to struggle through the same information, the same facts, and conclude that, yes, this guy did it.
Yeah.
I'm convinced this guy did it. And I agree there's nothing we can put on him.
Right. But he wants vindication.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
wants to be seen.
Yeah, he wants to be seen, which is fair. And Reese finishes his story from earlier about how he was there when Jordan Manning got busted for his manslaughter conviction. And he says, I could have taken him out that night. He'd thrown the guy through the front window. The guy broke his neck. Manning was coming out with a gun to finish the job. And when I told him to put the gun down, he hesitated. And I could have fired and taken him out, but I held back. And I put my gun down. And you don't know what it's like, Nick, living with the idea that you could have changed history, but you didn't. And Nick's
that
like,
whoops. Nick
Yeah.
right back into
Nick's
the flashback.
like, oh, actually, yeah, I do. Yeah, I could have killed Hitler. And this is the one where he's not actually with them. He's like over drinking by the door, but we're still seeing the flashback. I don't really want to talk about this flashback. Actually, not a lot happens. Most of it is Lacroix having a conversation with Hitler and Hitler trying to give him propaganda and Lacroix being like, I'm sorry, I'm apolitical. He goes,
Right.
I am, as it were, above all that. Yeah. And then Nick and Reese, we're back to Nick and Reese. And Reese comes out and he's getting his jacket on. And Nick is like, oh, are you headed home? And he's like, no, I just think I need to get some air. I'm going to go for a walk. And Nick says, I think I found something. Maybe, I don't know, because there's not really anything in this area that matches his description, the description of his murders recently. Oh, I found nothing is what he says. Nick says, I found nothing. Like there's nothing here that matches these descriptions. There's nothing here. Like I got nothing. And Reese says, well, it just seems so strange to me that so many people just disappear. And so many of them are never even missed. And all I could think about was the line from the Dresden Files where he says that the percentage of the population that goes missing every year is the same percentage of the population that goes missing in a herd to predation.
Yes.
And I was like, huh. So literally the percentage, or have you ever seen the map where it's like the cave systems and then people who go missing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, subterranean.
I mean, if you overlap
Yes.
the two, like more people go missing in areas with extensive cave systems than where there isn't an extensive cave system.
Right.
Anyway,
Just a little seed to plant there.
that's terrifying. That's terrifying. And Nick is like, yeah, I've made people disappear before. I mean, yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. But Nick says, we're a long way off from a report from Natalie because she's got a big job and she's going to have to kind of guess at a lot of it. And then is it going to even be right? And he goes, but we'll figure out who it is. Every life leaves a mark on the world. And Reese does this like sit up a little taller thing. And he goes, every soul touches another soul somewhere, for better or for worse.
We'll find out who she is. Every life leaves a mark on the world, Captain.
Every soul touches another somewhere, for better or worse.
I don't know if that's a quote. It looks like he's quoting, but I don't think he's quoting. I think he's just like internalizing the like, yeah, everybody affects somebody else, even if it's negatively.
It bolsters him.
Yeah, and Reese goes on, he's like, every time Manning kills someone, he assumes that because they're black, they won't be missed, that nobody's looking for them. And he's wrong. That's not true. And he's like, you know what? We're going to get him. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get him, Nick. And then he leaves. And Nick holds up Jordan Manning's book like he's looking through it, like, oh, I got to read this. There's poetry. Kind of sounds like LaCroix. That's got to be hard to read. And then we go to Jordan Manning. And Jordan Manning is paying an old prison buddy to beat him up. That's really all there is to say about this. He's just like, here's cash, hit me in the face. And then we go back to the precinct. And Reese returns from his walk, which is kind of important. He goes on this walk right now because he's missing during the time period.
Oh, that's
Jordan
a good point.
Manning gets assaulted. Yeah. So this is supposed to be oh no, did he do it? Which, no, because we just watched Jordan Manning get beat up. It's just that he doesn't have a good alibi for the time period, which, as we know, slam dunk. That's
it's
a nail
not
in the
even
coffin.
that. It's not even that he has an alibi or not. They don't even ask him. It's a report was submitted. Internal investigations is going to be processing this.
Yeah.
You need to stay away from the guy just so that you need to stay above board, beyond reproach.
Yeah.
For the protection of the police department.
Yeah.
And for, like, if this goes to trial or anything.
Yeah.
Like, you need to play it by the book, Reese.
Right.
And don't go near the guy because that just complicates things.
Yeah. And this whole thing kind of goes away really quickly, actually. It's sort of like, and then it's gone. Because Reese comes back and they're like, oh, yeah, Jordan Manning is charging you with assaulting him. Sorry, Joe, but you need to retain counsel. They give him the picture of the guy, of Jordan Manning, with like really fake looking, like facial damage or whatever. And he says, you're restrained from approaching him or contacting him under penalty of law. And then he leaves. And congratulations, that's the last we're going to hear about that. And
probably internal investigations looks at it and is like, oh, Manning and Reese have history.
Yeah.
And if Reese responded just like off the record, like, hey, this guy probably like had himself beat up.
Yeah.
And then claimed I did it because he's always trying to get at me.
Yeah.
And then they open the case file. Oh, yeah. He did that like 20 times when Reese arrested him before.
Yeah, it's fine. It just goes away and it's okay. Because if we'd belabored this, it would have felt like, all right. Fine.
Artificial conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we go to Tracy and Natalie. We divided the party. We split the party this episode, so we're flip-flopping a lot. And so Tracy and Natalie are out in the hallway, and it's implied that Tracy had some kind of episode because she's like holding O2 up, like she's breathing oxygen to try to like revive her. And Natalie's filling out this form. And Tracy goes, I don't know how you do this day in and day out. And Natalie goes, it's what I was trained to do, Tracy. Like, I like to think this is where the real detective work gets done. Sometimes it's where the only detective work gets done.
And fair that it's like she's trained. Like,
yeah,
she literally trained for years in this kind of thing. And so it's not like a personal failing of Tracy.
Right.
That she can't handle it. It's Natalie is a professional. She has cultivated the skills necessary.
As long as the body isn't burnt, she's good to go.
Right.
Yeah. She says, you've actually really done really well, Tracy. You know, those fibers that you found were hair. I got news. And it's distinctly not her hair. So it's probably the guy who assaulted her. That's his hair. So you did really good. But we also didn't find any insulin or illicit drugs. So.
Or signs of diabetes.
Yeah. So we don't know what those needle marks are. And Tracy goes, yeah, but the position of the needle mark suggests self-administration. And she's like, oh, Tracy, you're doing so good. Like, now you're starting to sound like a medical examiner. And Tracy goes, yeah, but what about vaccinations? And I love it. Natalie reaches over and pushes the oxygen mask back on her face. She goes, here, have another hit. I think it's helping. And Tracy goes, yeah, but who vaccinates themselves? And Natalie goes, oh, a doctor.
Natalie would know.
Yeah.
Natalie's done lots of
She's given
injections.
We're done. So then we go back to Reese, and Reese is like, oh, he's just trying to take me out so he can neutralize me. He must be planning another killing. Well, he's taking you out because you're obsessed with him and you're compromising.
You're the only one watching him.
Right. Of course he's neutralizing you. And you tipped off that you were there. He didn't even know. This was entirely random. It's not like he hung that body outside of Reese's precinct. The fact that the body was delivered to the precinct where Reese was the captain is entirely random.
Right. It's just coincidence.
So had he not, he could have covertly kept an eye on him and caught him, stalking a woman or trying to harm a woman.
It's possible that if the body had ended up somewhere else, that Reese may have,
heard about it.
Yeah, it may have crossed his desk at some point, or he may have an open query, like, hey, if there's anything matching this profile, send it my way.
Yeah.
Because I'm keeping a list. And that could have still been like, this happened right after Manning got out of prison.
Right.
I'll add that to the stack, and I need to get eyes on Manning.
Right.
And so it just would have taken a little longer.
Yeah, that's true. But Nick tells him, I don't get it. How come you didn't take your suspicions to your superiors before? How come you haven't told anybody else about this? And he's like, oh, you think I didn't? But look at me. I was one black cop and just a vice detective at the time. And here I am telling a story about a genocidal racist. He goes, I couldn't give the story away.
Captain, I still don't get it. Why didn't you bring your suspicions about Manning to your superiors?
I did. Oh, believe me, I did. I laid it all out for my captain and anybody who would listen.
And they didn't do anything about it?
Look at me, Nick. We're talking one black cop, a vice detective at that, telling this crazy scenario about a genocidal racist. I couldn't give that story away around here.
Times have changed.
You think so? I wish I thought so, too.
Nobody wanted to hear it. And Nick goes, times have changed. And Reese goes, you think so? I wish I thought so. And we're not going there. We are not going there. Again, I encourage you to find podcasts that discuss this, find books that talk about this, educate yourself on the history and current state of race relations in the U.S. by listening to person of color voices. Go forth, educate yourself. And we come back. We're coming back to the episode personally. I am. And Reese tells Nick, can you please go and watch Jordan Manning and keep him from hurting anyone else? If I'd been the one to beat him up, Nick, there wouldn't be pieces big enough left for them to photograph.
Yeah. He's a little biased.
Yeah. He's like, I need you to go and do this. I did not beat him up, just in case you're wondering, because I would have done better. That's what he says.
Yeah.
And this is when we cut to LaCroix, because what do we need in this moment? A LaCroix interlude. And LaCroix goes, pour the cappuccinos, friends. Smoke them if you have them, because it's poetry night.
Oh, LaCroix.
And he says, tonight's lightness is from the fellow who got rich writing greeting cards for the devil. And then he reads a poem from the book.
Pour the cappuccinos, friends. Smoke them if you have them. It's poetry time again. Some thoughts for you to dream on. Tonight's lightness exerted from killing mind by that fellow who got rich writing greeting cards for the devil. Life's ending evolution. Every death is growth. She should please me now, this dead one, with whatever warmth remains, with that rattle in her throat.
It's weird. It's like I see beauty in the final gurgle in her throat, and it sounds like the kind of book I would never read. I'd be like, ugh. And when we come back, LaCroix shuts the book, looks at the cover, and makes like a face.
Same, LaCroix.
Ugh.
Same.
And then we go back to the flashback because now LaCroix is joining in on the flashback parade because he's like, dang, that reminds me of that time I met Hitler. And this is when the guy gets up and he goes to clean up before they arrive at their destination. And it's actually him cutting his beard into the classic Hitler stash. And LaCroix and Nick are chatting about what they've sensed from him. And LaCroix's like, I kind of feel like maybe we need to bring him over and have him join the family. I think he'd liven things up a little bit. He'd certainly be interesting. And Nick goes, can you just kill him and have done with it? He feels so disaffected in this flashback. Like, dang it, I took a train because I was hoping LaCroix would want to fly and not ride the train. And I could have some moment of alone time. But LaCroix was like, oh, great, road trip. Yeah, we'll go together. And he came on the train with him. And LaCroix, I'm just going to shorthand all the rest of this flashback so we can be done with it. Because LaCroix goes into the bathroom. And the guy looks at him and he's like, why are you here? Because LaCroix is about to turn him into a vampire. And as soon as Hitler looks up and he's got the Hitler mustache, LaCroix is like, oh, God, no. No, it freaks him out. I don't know if it's the mustache or the overwhelming stench of evil that is emanating from Hitler. But it's too much for LaCroix and he decides he's not going to do it. The end. So then we come back to Jordan getting into a car, like a taxi. And Nick flies off after him. He's actually in his car, but he gets out of his car and flies off after him. And we get that like speedy low flight cam where he's flying just like 15 feet off the road. Mm-hmm. So canonically, Mothman's back.
Woo!
Somebody had a Mothman sighting that night. Congratulations. And then it's Jordan going to the same warehouse where he got beat up. And Nick lands and he's about to go in after him when Reese pops up because Reese is also following Jordan Manning. So what he was telling Nick was, I need you to follow him. I'm not going to tell you, but I'm also going to be following him. And I need you to be my eyes so that if we need a witness about what happens, you're there.
Yeah.
So Reese goes in after Jordan, who says, I knew you'd come, which kind of implies that Jordan had contacted Reese and set up this meeting. And this is when Reese is like, I want to see hands. Like, I want to see your hands. And Jordan Manning responds, come on, Joe. If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. And Reese goes, yeah, and hanging from a tree. And Jordan Manning goes, that could be arranged. So Reese is like, why'd you call me here? And what he did was he called him there so that he could lay out his master plan, which, again, I get it.
You caught me monologuing.
I get it. We wanted this guy to be, we wanted him to be a check every box villain. He's not only racist, he's not only killing people, he's also trying to incite a race war, a la serial killer who wanted to incite a race war. He killed a bunch of people and wrote Helter Skelter on the wall and carved a cross into his forehead. He's not technically a serial killer, though. He's a cult leader. Manson. Charles Manson. He's trying to incite a race war a la Charles Manson, like Helter Skelter, some Helter Skelter bullshit. And okay, all right, fine, it's fine. But again, when you make racism so much a caricature of racism, you undermine your actual point, which is that literally everyone has the capacity to do this. You don't have to be the kind of person who wants to start a race war. You can just be a straight up racist asshole.
Right.
And sometimes it's insidious and sometimes it's subtle, and very rarely is it this big and overt and easily identifiable. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And Reese is like, you killed those women, didn't you? And this is when Jordan is like, I thought you had more respect for my intelligence. You really think I'm going to be like, yeah, I killed all 20. Let me tell you their names and some facts. He's like, you're probably wearing a wire. I'm not going to confess to you. And then he punches Manning, which is, come on, Reese, please. And pulls a gun on him. And this is not going to look good on the IA investigation.
Right.
And Manning ends up daring him to do it because he's like, do it. It'll be all over the news that a black cop killed a white guy and it'll start the race war that I want to start. And Reese goes, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to throw you in with the worst brothers in the pen, and then I'm going to tell them what you're all about, and then I'm just going to let the dice fall where they may. Just thank you, Reese. That's excellent. That's a chef's kiss. I love it. And Jordan goes, yeah, that's not going to happen. No justice, no peace, Joe. And this is when Nick pops up. We see him like behind, and he's watched this whole thing. And then when Reese leaves, he pops up and he's like, yeah, man, I heard it all. And Reese is like, you heard it all? You actually heard it? Like, you believe me? This is his moment where he feels seen.
Right.
Because Nick is like, yeah, I heard it, but I don't know what the fuck he was saying. And Reese is like, see? This is what I'm talking about. This dude is unstable. And Nick is like, yeah, I see it. I got it. No, I heard. I see it. And Reese says, cool. I'm glad you're on my side. Oh, by the way, I grabbed some hair when I had him by the head. And I'm just going to take these samples in. And he like whips out a plastic bag and dumps the samples in there. Don't, Reese. You're not supposed to have any contact with him. You're not supposed to contact him. You're not supposed to talk to him. You're not supposed to
later
have anything
on,
to do with
they
him.
say they compared it with samples from his personal effects.
Okay, so maybe he says he
So I think
collected it.
this is just to confirm his suspicions that the hair samples would match.
Okay, so maybe Reese pulled a, I got it off his hairbrush when he was nowhere near me, and somebody brought me the hairbrush while I was safely in the precinct and nowhere near him. And Reese is like, I'm going to take these in. I'm going to get these processed. You stay on him. Don't lose him. And in the meantime, Tracy and Natalie have ID'd the victim, and she was a doctor, and she had finished her residency, and she was going home to Kenya to open a clinic. And they hadn't heard from her because the area she was going to was really remote and all her family is in Kenya. And so as soon as she was, quote, leaving, she became invisible. And that's why he was able to murder her and get away with it.
Right. Anybody who might have noticed she was missing would not have been able to get word out to them.
Yeah, and they didn't know she didn't arrive in Kenya. So even if she never contacted them again, they wouldn't know.
Right. They weren't expecting to hear from her anyway.
Right. And she actually did a drug study at the prison where Jordan Manning was, and he was one of the people that participated in the drug study.
Right. So they connected him.
Right. So he was planning this for a long time. And her airline tickets were never redeemed. Slam dunk. We know who this woman is. And Natalie pops in as Tracy is telling Reese about this and says, hey, the hair samples matched. You got them, Captain. And Tracy calls Nick and tells him to detain Manning. Reese goes, call your partner, tell him to detain Manning. We're coming with a warrant. No, Joe, not you. You're not supposed
Right?
to be there. It's fine. I get it. He needed to be the one that got him.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And so Manning spots the police lights as he's leaving the hotel, and he sees Nick come in and then Joe come in behind him, and he's like, oh shit. And then he just
and a whole
dips.
team.
Yeah, he just
So he's
dips.
like, okay, this is not Reese personally
yeah, this is,
confronting me. This is an official police activity.
they got something. Yeah, that's what's happening. And so Tracy goes to chase him, and Nick actually holds Tracy back, and he's like, let's just work on containment. Let's let Reese get this. Like this, Reese earned the chance to be the one that arrests this guy.
Right. And then we get some vampire powers that actually like add to the
Yes.
character growth.
I like this. I like this a lot because they're chasing him. Well, Reese is chasing him around the hotel, which has like a lot of stairs and a lot of basements. I don't know what's happening. It doesn't matter. But Nick is fucking.
Right. They start out in the lobby and then they go down like 4 flights of stairs.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Nick, this is my favorite part, is Nick fucking with him because every time he opens the door to get out, Nick is waiting on the other side of the
Right.
door.
So he's like shepherding.
Manning.
Nick is shepherding Manning, I guess, along the clear, easy path for Reese to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Perfect. No notes. Except Pan Guy. The guy who is walking with like a circular pan out in front. It's like in a comedy
Like the slapstick.
The slapstick comedy where they run through a pane of glass.
Right.
Except it's a guy with a pan. What is he doing there? Why is he why is
They
he
run through the kitchens.
Okay. But they do that. It doesn't matter. But this guy is there exclusively for them to have somebody to run into and make a big bang noise. And then Nick I mean, this really gives us a clue into the fact that Nick understands the importance of supporting Reese, but in not doing it for Reese. So like elevating Reese's voice, but not in speaking for Reese, because he could have arrested this man at any time. But what was more important was the fact that Reese was the one who caught him.
Right.
And he supports him in doing that. And in the end, he's like shows up at the end of this hallway, and it gets, because poor Reese is not catching up to Jordan. So he stops him in this hallway and delays him long enough that Reese can catch up. And he's like, we got you, motherfucker. It was an act of terrorism, wasn't it? I mean, it was terrorism whenever you're trying to incite fear to create conflict that is in fact terrorism.
Right, in the community. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, I wish I could be there when you meet your maker. And he goes, no, you don't, Reese. You don't want to meet the one who made me. And Nick is like, dude, same. Dude, same.
I only wish I could be there when you meet your maker.
No, you don't. You don't want to meet the one who made me, Joe. Ever.
And then they take him away. And Reese is giving a statement to the press. And he says that they found things in his effects that will allow them to open up some older cases. So he had some trophies. And, he said, I just want everybody to know that this is the end of a long and bitter personal journey for me. And I am so glad I'm finally gotten this guy off the streets for good. And then we cut to Manning in lockup, and he hangs himself after writing "No Justice, Joe" on the wall.
Yeah.
Oh, God. They couldn't even leave us that. They were just like, sorry. Well, you know what? It's true. Racism doesn't have a happy ending most of the time. There's never the slam dunk you want. The bad guy doesn't always lose. That's real life. And I don't watch TV for real life. I definitely don't watch Forever Night for real life, but like, I get it. So, okay. And then we come back to Nick talking to LaCroix at the bar, because he's like, hey, LaCroix. So I was thinking, why didn't you turn Hitler? And LaCroix goes, well, easy. He freaked me the fuck out. And Nick is like, oh, heard. Yeah, no problem.
He was too evil.
Yeah. And LaCroix goes, I've often wondered how the world would be different. I mean, what if he made him into a vampire and then he was vampire Hitler? I mean, I feel like
Right.
that would be worse. And then if he killed him, of course, we don't know what would happen. It kind of reminded me of that short story collection that we read, The Unfinished World.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
by Amber Sparks, where we met the people whose job it is. Like, once we invent time travel and it's cheap and freely available, there's an entire department of people whose whole job is to go back and reset the timeline every time someone goes back and tries to correct events. It. Yeah. So, like, there's a huge problem with people just vigilante going back and killing Hitler. So they have to monitor his timeline and go back and stop the people from killing him. Yeah.
The psychological damage of having to
save the bad guy,
protect the tragedies
over and over
of history.
And over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good story. And then he burns the picture that Hitler gave him of him, which he had conveniently in his pocket. And he just tosses it in the ashtray. And that's the end of the episode.
He was thinking about it because he'd read that book.
And I just want to point out that on the wall behind him, there's a portrait of Jeanette painted on the wall of the Raven.
Oh, is that the portrait that she left at Nick's?
No, it's not a hanging portrait. It's like somebody did a mural and Jeanette is in the mural.
Oh, is this over the one that's been there?
No, it's not the naked woman over the bar.
Okay.
Who is still naked and still on television. I guess it's fine as long as it's a picture. I don't know. No, it's like a portrait of Jeanette, but it's painted directly onto the wall. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of behind and to the left of LaCroix's head on screen, which I thought was really interesting as like this is the woman who inspired this place. Here's my homage to her. Mm-hmm. And that's the end of the episode. And now we've got 3 to go.
So close to the end.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe we've almost done it. And I can't believe we just survived Jane Doe. Oof. I mean, I know I'm not saying it's a bad episode. It's not. It's a challenging episode to discuss, because so much happens and there's some things that just don't translate well to 2024 and there's some things that do. And a lot of it is not something that I feel is mine to talk about. And that's why I will again, for the third time, I am again asking you to go educate yourself about this by listening to someone whose voice has a lot greater weight in this space than mine does. As in the people who actually experienced this.
Right.
And I cannot believe that there was a television show in 1996 that talked about this. And that we had a character like Nick who is portrayed as supporting Reese, but not doing it for Reese. This definitely feels like the situation where in 1990 you'd be like, well, what you need is a white detective who everybody will believe to tell your story. Dunzo, what's your problem? But instead it's like, no, we are going to get Nick on Reese's side, and then he is going to support Reese's campaign. He's not going to take it over.
Mm-hmm.
Because Nick has a reputation. At any point, he could have popped in and been like, oh, I mean, he could have used his privilege in a way that made, he could have used how do I fucking phrase this? He could have used his clout in the department to get those investigations reopened. But what would that say if this detective was able to accomplish something that the captain, who gave a firsthand account of knowing a woman that was murdered by this guy and knowing he did it, and everyone's like, oh, fucking Reese, again with the Jordan Manning thing. And then Nick is like, hey guys, I think Jordan Manning did this. And everyone was like, oh my God, really? It doesn't come across the same as what we went with in the episode, which I think is actually really progressive. And it's fascinating that we did this, that we did domestic abuse. And then we did the nature of neurological differences and whether you need to be fixed or are you valid already for who you are. And what happens when you encourage the narrative that they are in some way broken and they pick up on it and it becomes like a source of trauma for them. And that's Fallen Idol, obviously. And then we did race dynamics and systemic racism and the illicit of the awful effects of long-term systemic racism on the population. Like 20 people never got identified because they were Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And because they probably were not given, they were probably, quote, less dead than other cases. Even now we do this. There was that case, maybe it was a couple of years ago now, where there's the white influencer who went missing. And she was like a van life influencer. And she was traveling with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend showed up back at her house with her van without her.
Right.
And so for like Gabby Petito. So for a while she was missing and we were looking for her and they found her body. And that was all solved really quickly. Well, do you know how many people of color, how many indigenous women, how many non-white people have gone missing since then? And have you heard anything about it? And this is why sometimes I like to listen to true crime, and specifically I like to listen to Crime Junkie because they do a lot to elevate stories that should be told and haven't been told. So like missing and endangered indigenous and minority women. And I'm just going to leave it at that because there's no solution to this problem, but there is awareness of this problem. And with awareness will come solutions. So educate yourself. Do not be willfully blind to what happens in the world around you, because then how can you see it when it happens in your own life?
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up in the 90s. Do you know what we have had to unlearn? Do you know the work we've had to put into it? And I'm glad I did it, and I'm happy to have done the work. I'm not complaining about it, but we think of the 90s as modern, and it's not. You know, because they kind of had cell phones, and they kind of like the media that we interact with from the 90s looks modern-ish because now all those styles have come back. So we're like, oh yeah, no, they're not. The sensibilities have changed so completely from the 90s. I can't even express it. So anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that because I have more to say, but I'll just keep going forever. And again, go find. I'll find some podcasts and put them in the show notes.
Yeah, good idea.
That you can go and listen to that are talking about this. That go and educate yourself. So I'm gonna leave it there.
All right.
Until next time, friends.
Bye.
Bye.